Welcome to Clavid. This video in the How-To series shows how to create new Clavid OpenID account using a SuisseID. If you already have a Clavid OpenID, please watch the separate video called SuisseID registration for an existing Clavid account. I am first going to the Clavid website by entering clavid.com in my browser. There I use the red sign up button in the left bottom part of the web page that will bring me to the first step of the Clavid account registration. I now use the button with a SuisseID logo on it, bringing me to the second step of registration. Here I have to state that I agree the terms of service of Clavid by checking the corresponding checkbox. Now I choose a username that should be easy to remember. In this example I use Master. I see the full OpenID on the right of the username field. This OpenID will be used for OpenID enabled sites after the registration is completed. Now I have to assure that my SuisseID is properly installed on the system I'm using, and I have to plug in my SuisseID before I continue. So I plug in my SuisseID into the USB port of my computer. Your SuisseID might look differently to mine depending on the vendor where you bought the SuisseID. Okay, back to the Clavid registration page. I press the Continue button and I get asked to enter my PIN in order to allow the computer access to my SuisseID. After entering my PIN, I press Enter and arrive at the third step. As the SuisseID contains my personal information, the fields first name, last name and email address are already filled in. I simply check that the information is correct and press Register. At step 4, I get informed that my new account got registered successfully and it states my username as well as my OpenID. I also get informed that I will receive an email message with further instructions on the activation of my account. So I go and check my email and look for a message containing the subject Clavid. Oh, here it is! In case my email client recognized the activation link, I just click on it, or I can copy the whole link and paste it to my browser. I finally reached step 5 and Clavid shows me that my account got successfully activated. Now I could go to the Clavid portal and manage my account settings. However, I just want to try my newly created OpenID using my SuisseID on an OpenID enabled service. In order to do so, I enter the URL local.ch, which is an OpenID enabled major regional search engine in Switzerland. I just click the login link at the top menu and press the button Login with OpenID. Here I enter my newly created OpenID called master.clavid.com and press Login. I get now redirected to the Clavid login screen. I see that Clavid automatically recognized that I am using an SSL client certificate, which is actually my SuisseID. I assure that my SuisseID is plugged in. As I have just used my SuisseID in the registration process, I will not get prompted to enter my PIN again. So I simply click Login and end up at local.ch, authenticated with my SuisseID. You want to know more? Go to the Clavid website at clavid.com. Thank you. Clavid, one key, all access.